time for Old Roommates. This week on the show, we revisit the classic Dave from 1993, starring Kevin Kline. So grab your ballot and get ready for another great show.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Old Roommates, the only podcast that revisits pop culture through a middle-aged lens. This is Brian.
And this is Christina. Happy Election Day!
It's Election Day!
Woo-hoo!
If you have not voted yet in our national election, our general election as they call it, pause this, go vote, and come back. We'll be waiting for you.
Yeah, we'll wait.
But yeah, it's an exciting time, and we thought this movie, Dave, would be a great Election Day choice.
Sure.
So, in full disclosure, we're recording this episode a little early, because we're not obviously sitting here on a Tuesday morning. We have jobs to do.
We're voting.
We're out voting.
We're out voting.
But yeah, so I mean, God knows what the news cycle will look like by the time Election Day rolls around, but we wish everyone an amazing Election Day.
Absolutely.
And make sure you exercise your right to vote. Christina, 1993.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, what was your first experience with this movie?
This movie, honestly, was one of my favorite movies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I don't think we talked about that when we were talking about watching it, but I think this is the movie that made me fall in love with Kevin Kline, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Love Kevin Kline as an actor, and this movie I absolutely loved. This is one of those movies that when I was getting, together with friends and we're like, what do you want to rent? I was like, let's rent Dave. Because it just, honestly, it always made me feel good. It's one of those movies that just make you feel good. I always felt like it had a great plot, and the acting was fun, and it was different than other movies that I had seen, and it had a great ending. So I always loved this movie. It was just always a good movie. I watched it several times, but I had not seen it in easily 20 years.
Yeah.
So, I think, 1993. I'm like, wait, what year is this? So, but yeah, no, one of my favorite movies. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, similar. It's not one of my favorite movies by any stretch, but you said the word feel good. It is such a feel-good movie. Mm-hmm. I forgot how truly happy it made me watching it. And how easy, I remember back then being like, not that it's like, oh wow, it's so easy to be president. But it's right. That's what like the idea of leading with your heart or mm-hmm. whatever. And I think what I liked a lot about it then was that it didn't rely on shticky, ooh, how are they gonna find out? It's really not an issue.
Not at all.
And I remembered it so well then. And I was surprised how much I remembered. I also think I remembered it being a little boring at parts. I was like, oh, okay. And I did also think that Sigourney Weaver, who I'm a huge fan of, was gonna be in it a lot more, and she's really not until about halfway through.
Sure.
But I agree. My big takeaway from 1993 with this movie, which I did see in a movie theater, was this is true, feel-good, happy movie. Mm-hmm. All right, so now, with our middle-agedness, mm-hmm. When did you... So you just revisited this, and what was your...
I hated it. Just kidding. No, I still loved it. So it was great to revisit. I was very happy that we decided to do this movie, especially at this time in history. Just watching a movie, that's not politically charged so much. And just I don't know, it just gave you, like I said, it makes you feel good. I was happy to watch it. And I will say, I still loved it. Mm-hmm. It was great to see it again. And I think we talked about this just a few minutes ago. I don't really have a ton of notes on it.
Yeah, me neither.
And it was nice to be able to just watch a movie, because a lot of times I'll watch some movies and I'll be like furiously writing notes down and be like, oh, I noticed this, and oh, look at that, and they didn't do this. And this one, I was able to really just sort of sit back and relax and enjoy it and just kind of soak it in.
It's an easy watch, and it's
so
nice,
easy.
and because I don't have very many notes either, and I think it's because I was just chilling, I was enjoying this movie. There's drama, but it's not high drama. There's it is a very lovely Saturday, Saturday morning or afternoon little movie.
And
I don't know.
And he makes it, I really feel like he makes it so believable.
Kevin Kline.
Yeah. It's so funny because it's not a typical scenario. I don't think many actors could pull this role off without it making it seem like this wouldn't really happen. That doesn't really occur to me when I'm watching it with Kevin Kline in the role.
Well, he's great in this because it's his other, the main character is who has to. If you're unfamiliar with the movie, I don't think this is going to give anything away. Basically, there's an incident with the President of the United States. They find a look-alike guy who actually impersonates the president as a joke at town events, and he makes this little side business as looking like the president and all this kind of stuff. So the CIA or the FBI or whatever, basically,
I think it's a Secret
Service, one of them. Secret Service. I think you're right. It is Secret Service. So with Ving Rhames with hair, it's funny to see. So. They basically tell him, listen, there's an incident with the president.
But
he's
that's not
incapacitated.
actually what happens.
Oh! I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. They use him for an event for security reasons, but then something happens.
During that other event, something happens and he is needed for a longer period of time.
Yes.
But yes, and I really liked the fact that he's already a president impersonator. He's already impersonating the president.
So it's not
like
stretch.
Someone just sees him on the side of the street and says, hey, you look like the president. And he's like, I do? he knows that he looks like the president. And he has, like you said, showed up to different events as an impersonator of the president. And so he is aware of his mannerisms.
Yeah.
So it's not just plucking
really
someone out of the thin air. He already has a little bit of experience doing that.
Yeah.
And you get the sense that he's an actor. I would not have been surprised if Dave had mentioned, oh yeah, I was in community theater.
Yeah.
Because he just has that sort of personality. He's fun-loving, and he just has that personality that he would be on stage. So it's very believable that they would choose this guy.
Which brings up a point that I had as a negative, and I don't have very many negatives, but he does accept instantly. In fact, there's really isn't much of a conversation at all. It's really almost like your country needs you to step in for the president, because he has to be, he's going to be there for part of the event and then leave. You have to step in and just wave to people, and he says, sure. You're right. During that event, they're bringing him home. His job is done. Mm-hmm. But while they're driving him home, something has happened to the president, and they need him to do for a longer stretch. Right. So, but it is interesting because it's my note was he accepts instantly, and it's mostly off camera. There aren't many questions or concerns he has. He's pretty sure he can nail this, and he's actually very excited by it. And I think that was a really smart choice because what you're left with isn't this bumbling clod of a person. You're exactly right. He already is doing this job, but now he has to convince the world, not just a small town. He has to convince the world he's the president.
And his personality is that of someone that you believe feels like he can do whatever.
Yeah.
He's just such a guy. If someone told him, oh, you're going to have to work in, whatever, in the mines or something, he'd be like, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
He has a lot of confidence.
Well, remember, too, part of that I think idea is from the job part. His real job is working at an employment agency, and he will go to the office and be like, you have to hire this person. Give her a job. She's amazing. And not only that, her husband is sick and da-da-da. And so he leads with his heart, and he has that idea of, like, anyone can do anything. Like, you have to give people a chance to show themselves. And I think it makes perfect sense for this character. It's very well written. And
go ahead. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no. Very well written. What I liked, too, is that you get a sense of his personality just from the way he keeps his office. It's very messy. Papers on top, books on top of papers on top of a printer. Then you get into his house, and his sort of TV room is like a TV with a VCR or something on it, and then under books and under papers. So you get this idea that he's just always working and discombobulated and everything else, but he's not dumb. He's not clumsy. He just is very excited about getting to work.
Very enthusiastic. So you said there was a negative, but I don't know if I heard the
negative.
negative.
The negative was
the negative?
Well, he just accepts. Like, you don't really... So with Ving Rhames, he walks into his house, and Ving Rhames is sitting there with the other Secret Service agent. I'm pretty sure from when he sees them sitting in his living room to him being escorted to be president, I think it's 20 seconds. I mean, it is very quick. He has...
Right.
I think he has a question or two, but I guess my point is his accepting of this, or his... I mean, they're not abducting him.
Right, no.
You know, but it was mostly off camera, and I was like, I just wondered, did he have any real questions about this? Like, It's just not enough. That little... But
I feel like his personality is that he would accept right away. Like, I don't think that it's unbelievable. I mean, it's a little bit unbelievable. A little bit. But I don't think, like...
Well, his
personality is... If it was a different type of personality in that role, I would question it more. But because of who he is... Because even later on, he's very impulsive. And you can see, he has this, like... Not only is he impulsive, but he's also very confident, and he's also very much... very positive, and I can do this. And I feel like all of those personality traits together make that moment believable. That someone's going to be in your house saying, I need you, the president needs you, that his personality would say, sure. I personally wouldn't say sure right away. I would have other things I would have other questions. You would probably have other questions. But that particular person... I believe would just be like, okay, let's do it. So
yeah,
that's just my thought
that's fair. That's fair. I mean, I think I wrote and then I wrote the questions he asks aren't really necessarily the questions most would ask. To your point in that conversation, like I think he asks, "Is this legal?" when he's sitting in the chair, and I'm like, that's interesting. That never crossed my mind because it's the president. Like, you're helping the country. I mean, it's just. There were just some questions where I'm like, that is not maybe the first 20 questions. The questions he asked wouldn't necessarily be the first 20 questions I would think most people would ask. So it was just a weird, the way the movie is sort of guiding it. But I think, again, going back to the character, it is probably true to the character that he's so gung-ho that he doesn't care about a lot of the points.
Right. Also, keep in mind, he doesn't have a family. He doesn't have a wife. He doesn't even have a dog. Do you know what I mean? So he's just a single guy, like, you know, he has a job, but then they took care of that with a phone call. Right? But, so I don't know, I just feel like, whatever, it is what it is. I think it's believable.
I loved the idea that's another little negative. When the actual president and first lady, Sigourney Weaver, and the other, Kevin Kline, the actual president, walk off the chopper, they're barely smiling. That was one thing where I was like, I feel like they could have turned that up a little bit, and it would have been funnier, because you realize the first lady and the president despise each other. Like, it is a dead marriage. They are only in it for show. And so, they're not going to get a divorce while they're president and first lady, but the marriage is dead. So, but then I go right into a really big positive, which I love that scene where Sigourney Weaver walks in and she's like, Who was she, Bill? Another patriotic secretary.
Good. It's so good. That whole scene is so good when they first meet because Kevin. All right,
he's so excited.
So I'm going to call them Dave and Bill because Dave,
that's right.
Dave is
You're
the
right.
character
Yeah.
and Bill is the president.
Yeah.
Played both by Kevin Kline. But,
yeah.
So when Dave is first meeting the president, he's very nervous about meeting her because he's afraid that she's going to figure out that it's not Bill. And I love that they don't tell him ahead of time that they don't get along and that she hates them or whatever. I love that surprise that he's just like, oh.
This is part of it too.
Okay. And I think that he played it really well.
Yeah.
And he just says that same
1,000.
line, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for doing this,
yeah.
Like,
Christina,
it was so good.
1,000%. I have that note. He looks at her like you would look at the first lady walking into the room, regardless of who the first lady is. Like there's that
100%.
anxiety, anxiousness, like trying to pull yourself together, and he has no clue their relationship. And and I think she walks in saying, "I thought people used to die from."
Why can't you die from a stroke like
everyone
most people?
else?
Why can't you die from a stroke like everyone else? Or normal people? I don't know.
She said something like that, but that's her opening line. And it's so funny. And then she's like, I love that line.
And she's shocked. And then I love at the end when they walk out and he's like, she hates me. And then the two guys, Alan and Bob, like high five or something. They're like, yes, like this is great.
It's such a good twist on the story. Like, I mean, it makes things easier that they don't interact much, right?
Sure.
So there's that sort of. That's what I mean. I think the movie is really smart because it doesn't have all those like awful weird cliches. Like if they had this passionate romantic marriage, that would just lead to goofy, dorky moments that we've seen. It's
very, very smart.
It's very smart,
and it also wouldn't be quite as believable when they actually come together. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be well, she's in a happy marriage with Bill and now she's in a relationship with Dave. Is it because he looks like him? But no, it's more she's in this relationship in spite of the fact that he looks like Bill because she hates Bill. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really, really well done. I love that they did it that way.
Yeah. So really quick, I laughed out loud when, and super quick, he is behaving like how most people would behave in that room, in the bedroom, right? And he's like looking around and he picks up
the phone.
And they're like, yes, Mr. President. He's like, nothing, good night. And he's
it's so real. I love that. I will say, I want to get back to a little bit, just rewind just a tiny bit. So when I was watching this, it was during the same time frame where President Trump had been diagnosed with COVID.
1,000%.
Was it the same time for you too? So I found it very eerily similar.
Yeah.
Not to get any political or anything. But during the situation, I wrote down, it just feels so real. The way that the whole government is saying, the president is fine.
Yeah.
We need to make the people feel safe and make the people feel secure. We need to underplay his condition.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is happening right now? It was really bizarre.
1,000%.
Did you feel the same way?
I told Carl, I paused it because Carl was working in his office, and I was like, I paused it and I was like, I wonder if I should just rewatch this with Carl right now because it is the same. President Trump was diagnosed and he went into Walter Reed. This is and like while we're watching, clearly both of us we're watching this. While our president is in Walter Reed Hospital with conditions unknown because we're hearing very different things as Americans. We're hearing things from inside the hospital. We're hearing things from his handlers and his personal doctors. We're hearing. It's this miracles from heaven, miracles from God, the steroid thing, and so you're hearing all this stuff, and you're watching Dave, and Christina, it is exactly what you're saying. It's also what what needs to happen for people to not talk about this, because they don't want Americans to panic, or the world to panic. So they're paying off the hospital staff. They paid the nurse. This is in the movie. Dave.
Right.
$50,000 to every nurse. This is so weird. $100,000 to the doctors. And then one guy...
And we're not saying this would happen.
No.
Right. We're
but
just saying this is what happened in the movie. Yes.
But it's interesting. And then it says, and one guy refused until we made him head of the CDC. So it's all of these like behind the scenes
and it just seemed a little... I just wrote down, it seems a little too real.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was very interesting timing that obviously we're doing this because it's election time.
Oh yeah, is not, I forgot about that. I forgot about that angle.
But I did too, 100%.
Well, we picked this movie before he was diagnosed.
Yes, we did.
We picked this before he was diagnosed.
Yes, we did.
And I forgot about that little. It's a little part of this movie,
right?
But it's
And for those of you who did not watch this movie, basically the president has a severe stroke, a major stroke, and they don't think he's going to come out of it.
Yeah.
But they tell everyone that he had a minor. I don't even think they called it a stroke. They called it something else, which means stroke, but to the American people, because they talk on the talk shows and stuff like that. Well, that's a stroke. Yeah. But anyway, they downplay it like a little tiny itty bitty minor stroke, and he's up and at 'em the next day, which obviously it's Dave now.
Yeah.
But that's the background of it. It was very
better than ever,
stroke.
Stronger than ever,
stronger than
rolling
ever.
around in the front lawn of the White House with dogs and the whole thing.
And his personality changed too.
And it's funny because I love how they deal so much with the talking heads with all the news.
It's so funny.
This president's the best thing that ever happened to him. He's stronger than ever. He's back and better. And and
then they have the other one saying, "Oh, he'll be back to being the jerk," like that kind of thing.
Well, it's funny because the suspicions. The only suspicious person is Oliver Stone.
Oh my gosh, the conspiracy theory. And I love it. It's so funny. He's on Larry King, and he's like, if you take a look at little tiny, if you look at a picture of the president before the stroke and the president after the stroke, you'll see minor differences. And then Larry King is like, are you saying that this is a different person? Like, he actually comes out and says it.
But he's the only one. And part of the reason for that is because this new Bill, which is Dave, is making all these amazing positive changes. And he's becoming... And he's a much more likable president than the original president.
Right.
So that's why no one's questioning that he might look a little different or behave a little different or his mannerisms, or why him and his wife are suddenly everywhere together. So it's, it all makes sense. It's really good.
Oh my gosh. So fun. What else? I did love that first walk, even before the president had the stroke, when he does his first walk. All he has to do, and they're very clear, walk from one end of the room to the other. He has to walk past a crowd of people.
Yeah.
And I love the way they play it, because at first he's walking, you can tell he's nervous. He's just walking, and he's a little slow, and he's like, okay, and he's not really making eye contact. Then he sees, and he starts like a little wave, and then a little smile. And then you can see the confidence building, and he's like realizing that this is like the moment of a lifetime.
Yeah.
And he's walking, he's like, hey. Yeah. And he's waving, and he's nodding, and then at the very end, of course, he turns around. He's like, God bless America, or something like that. I love the way they played it. It just, you can see that he gets more comfortable, and it's a long hallway.
Yeah.
It was just so fun to see that. Yeah. It was just really, really fun to see that.
Well, it ties all into that feel-good thing. Like, you just have to see it. It's so good.
Very relatable.
Yeah. Well, it's also like, he realizes, like, the instant love he's receiving from all of these people. They're so happy and excited to see him. And he just plays into it. And I think it's great. And it's also, like, you could, it's the same thing with, like, the daycare centers. It's a daycare center when he, like, waves the cameras away to talk to this one boy.
It's a homeless shelter.
But it was all children, and they were learning stuff.
But remember, they walked in, and he was like, "Oh, there's children here," and then the wife said, "Yes, Bill, children are homeless too."
Yeah, that's right.
So
sorry.
That's okay.
Wow, I didn't realize this is Christina
Anything
correcting Brian
else?
hour. Playing with the dogs I had. That was true. They were dogs, right, Christina?
Yes, they were dogs. 2 of them.
And pushing the jobs initiative. But it's like that whole thing of just the positive, happy, president.
Yeah, it's really, it just, he was fun, and you could see how people would just fall in love with this particular president. The budget meeting was one of my favorite scenes. So it's after they visit the homeless shelter, and he's starting to get into being a president now.
Yes.
Now he's like realizing, he's like, this is cool. Like, there's some changes that can be made. And he's kind of getting a little too into it. Mm-hmm. And then Alan and Bob, the guys who orchestrated all of this, come in, and they're like, oh, no, I know what it was. So the wife comes in the middle of his shower.
Oh, yeah.
And says, how could you do this after all we did? We had such a great time at the shelter, and you had me believing that you had changed or whatever. And he's like, what are you talking about? Because, of course, he doesn't know what's happening.
Right.
And come to find out, they were taking all this money away that was going to damage or take away from the homeless shelters.
$650 million.
$650 million. And so he gets upset and talks to Bob and Alan and says, what do you mean? And they're like, what are you talking about? You're not the president. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, you are not the president. You can't be making these decisions. And then he says, hey, if you can find $650 million, then you can have your shelter back.
Right.
Not realizing that Dave's like, all right, I'll find it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he takes his friend in, Charles Grodin, who is one of my favorite people. But one of my favorite actors. And he plays this awesome. And I love the scenes that they have together, because I remember the first time I watched this movie, and I'm like, this can happen. Like, why don't they do this? Right? Why don't they really do this in Washington? Like, why don't they actually sit down and, like, figure out what is needed and have these conversations? Mm-hmm. Like, it really made me hopeful.
Listen, the money, don't get me started, but, the money's all there. It's just a matter of where we're putting it. Right. That's all. And I think, made perfect sense. I just love, how pen and paper Charles Grodin was, and they just sat there and figured it out and looked at stuff and this doesn't make any sense. Why would you pay contractors who aren't working? Right. And all this kind of stuff. So listen, it was very accessible. It was not you didn't need to know anything about how the Pentagon or however anything runs to understand how they were coming up with this money. Right. And I really loved it, because it was it wasn't stupid. It was just smart enough to be yeah, we're going along with this.
I totally believed anybody could do this.
Yeah.
We're paying whatever amount of money, 65 million people, so that people feel good about their cars.
Right. Cars they already have. Yeah, because it was an automobile reassurance campaign. Right. Meaning you bought an American car, so we're going to do an ad campaign to make you feel better about your purchase. And his point is, I already bought the car. Yeah. Why do I need to feel confident about something I already bought?
And I love he's ready to argue it, and now he's like, yeah, you're right.
Well, because he made those people excited too, and and it was collaborative. They were all getting involved, and they were all let's do this. Yeah.
So inspiring. Yeah. And then Bob, the villain Bob Alexander, he's like, Mr. President, are you sure? He's like, yeah, this is what we want to do. Then because
and it's Frank Langella, who is awesome.
He's so good.
He's so good.
There's so many good ones.
There's a lot of really good supporting.
Even Ben Kingsley. He wasn't in it very often, but he was the vice president.
So let's talk about Ben, because that was when, I have to be honest, I got a little fatigue. Yeah. That was when I was like, I didn't think they were going to go. I forgot that they went there with us, and it's not very time consuming. But what they do is. What is Frank Langella's character's name? It's not Bob. Is it Bob?
Bob Alexander.
Bob Alexander. it's a bit complicated, but basically they want to send the vice president to Africa because they're afraid. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Which they did at the very beginning.
In the very beginning.
Which is a little unbelievable.
Right. To Africa on some goodwill campaign. And because they don't want the president and vice president to interact because they're afraid the vice president will catch on this is not really the president.
Right.
Okay. While he's away, while the vice president's away, they want to sort of dig up dirt or create dirt or dig up dirt and then blame it on the vice president. Mm-hmm. When he comes back, force the vice president to resign. Dave, as Bill, becomes... appoints Bob Alexander as vice president. Mm-hmm. But then they have the president have another real stroke and die. Mm-hmm. Or he's basically in the coma. Right. And then the vice president, Bob Alexander, becomes the president.
Right.
Ta-da! Did I get that right?
Yes, you sure did. Nicely done.
So Ben Kingsley plays the vice president, but I did feel that was one thing for me where I'm like, I think I'm ready for this to be over. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think like what you needed to see was that the vice president was a decent, noble person.
Right, and I agree with you. Mm-hmm. I agree that it didn't need to be as long.
Yeah.
It lost some momentum because we're used to seeing a lot of that positive energy.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing like all this negative energy.
Exactly.
And at the same time, and I think the timing was a little bit poor too, because at the same time they're starting this romance with the First Lady and Dave, right? They're starting this like, and that is not very energetic, right? It's very... It's, romantic. It's, soft music. It's sitting in the field eating sandwiches.
Yeah. And they have great chemistry, by the way.
They do have great chemistry. They do. But I feel like because it's that energy has been now waned.
Yeah.
So it's just the little romance, and then it's the political side of it, like, oh, we're gonna, the devious part of it. Mm-hmm. All of that, like, all that awesome, positive energy is, like, now getting sucked out of the room. I think maybe the timing or the way that they did the scenes might have, I would have done it a little differently. Mm-hmm. I appreciated the story. I appreciated the plan. Mm-hmm. And, because, again, it's sort of one of those things, it probably could work. Mm-hmm. There's so many back room dealings and things like that. You could absolutely pin something on somebody that it wasn't their fault. Mm-hmm. And I appreciated the plan, and I really, really loved the ending when because that was I remember it being a surprise to me the first time I saw it.
Yes, when he collapses. And
the whole plan, and all of a sudden it was like, what? And that, talk about a feel-good moment, right? You're like, oh my God, they did it. And it all in one fell swoop. He screws over the real president, who was really to blame for all this stuff. Yeah. He screws over Bob Alexander, and then he clears the vice president's name. All in one moment. And then he collapses and now pretends he's in this, major stroke, and he becomes the driver of the ambulance. And, like, all of this stuff all came together so perfectly at the end. Yeah. I loved the ending. Yeah.
The only thing I felt was, like, it's just him walking away with this giant bag and, like, into the mist. And, like, all these reporters are everywhere. Like no one notices the paramedic walking away from everything. Like, it's a little strange.
It's a little bit
strange. Not that he would be the focus, the focus, but I guess my point is, like, the president is in a very precarious state. His health is on the line. And then suddenly one of the EMTs is just walking completely away from the whole scene.
I hear what you're saying.
It's a little weird.
It's a little weird, but also there's so much
melee
chaos that I could see it sort of work. I mean, I could, it would work better than if you tried to, like, run away. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that him just walking away kind of puts him back in his world.
True.
And I thought they did it pretty well job. But I understand what you're saying, too.
Should we take a little break?
Let's take a little break. I need to, compose myself.
We'll come back with final thoughts and questions.
Hey there, it's Brian and Christina. We just wanted to take this break to thank you for listening to Old Roommates, the only podcast that revisits pulp culture through a middle-aged lens. Please subscribe to Old Roommates on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. And give us a rating or review while you're there.
And if you have any questions, comments, or observations, shoot us an email at oldroommatespod@gmail.com. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Old Roommates. Thanks for listening, and now, back to the show.
And we're back discussing Dave, our 1993 political movie, if you will.
Yeah.
On Election Day.
There's one funny thing that, and I'm sure you noticed it, we've talked about this before. Mm-hmm. When in doubt, have the main character fall backwards in a chair. Yes. Do you remember that? So Laura
Yes,
Linney,
I noticed that. It reminded me of My Best Friend's Wedding.
Oh, and,
right?
Ally McBeal. There's so many 90s... pop culture things where they just would have the main character fall backwards in a chair.
Right.
But Laura Linney plays the secretary who the original president was having an affair with, and that's when he had the episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I did find it to be interesting that was never revisited, that she didn't try to hit on him again. Did you say that?
I have in my notes, I wrote, what I love, I also, I love the movie for what it is, but I also love the movie for what it didn't do, and we talked about that in the beginning of the episode, where it's he didn't mess up people's names. He just knew them. He was he's a people person. Right. He loved people.
And remember, that's how he was in the beginning, too. At the unemployment. He walked in and he went into some other place. He's like, hey, Sarah, hey, Lynn. That's who he was.
He loves people. And he was very well studied, and it just helped the movie so much that it didn't have to deal with all those sort of the goofiness.
Yeah.
I also wrote to the Laura Linney thing. I said, I'm so glad we were spared a scene where Laura Linney's character is throwing herself at him. You get that moment where she's like, you really scared me. And she grabs onto him really tight when she sees him. She's like, you really scared me, or something like that. And he's like, okay. And he walks away. And they're like, oh, they were very close. I also like that there's none of the bumbling around the White House where it's can you picture him messing up the coffee maker or setting fire?
Yeah,
because I feel like you don't need it. And it didn't happen. I honestly think in the hands of another filmmaker, Ivan Reitman made this film, they would have gone the bumbling route. If you imagine this movie with Will Ferrell, right, or someone like that, or there would have been goofy intercom moments. There would have been
the only thing they did was the phone, and that was believable.
That was
100%
5
believable
seconds,
that he would
totally
have done
funny and believable. Yeah, so I just like that it was smart to spare us all the goofiness.
Yes,
we're all adults. We're all adults here.
And I loved. Actually, we didn't talk about this, but I loved the moment when he was practicing the speech.
Yeah.
And then he had that moment with Alan where he's up on the podium and he's talking and he starts saying the speech and he's like, oh, you like that speech? Or they were talking about the speech.
His
and he's
hands.
Like, oh. And then he's like, yeah, oh, yeah. The hands go like this because remember, and then we went like this. And he's like, oh, you know that speech? He's like, I love that speech. And then Alan's like, I wrote that speech. And he's like, it's great. And then he starts talking the speech and you can see even Bob and Alan looking at him wow. This guy's convincing.
Yes.
Is this really him? It was really
He's
cool.
just so excited, and he loves his country, and he's just...
He's the perfect president,
It's so
really,
good.
right?
It's so good. See
Leading
this movie.
with his heart and all that.
And also,
but
really
I have
good,
other things to say before you start...
What?
No, I used...
All I was going to say is I think the movie did a really good job of recreating that world.
Right, I know.
Okay, yeah.
But you said, see this movie, so it seemed like you were wrapping it up. But there's a couple more things that I want to say. Oh. So, there's the moment with Charles Grodin. Grodin, I'm sorry. Oh my God, I love Grodin.
It's not Josh Groban, Christine.
Shut up. I'll edit that out. Just kidding. So, when he's leaving... And Dave's like, hey, maybe we can go to Camp David. And he's like, Camp David? And he's like, yeah. And he just leans in. He goes, get out of here as fast as you can. Like, snap out of it, buddy.
Yeah.
It was such a funny move. I love that moment.
Yeah.
Really, I love that moment. One of my negatives, I have a couple of negatives. Oh, I'll say one more positive thing. Is that I just love, and we talked about the ending a little bit before, but I love that the president took responsibility for everything. And he was like, look, I'm the president, the buck stops here. Yeah. And I'm taking responsibility. Mm-hmm. And that was like, that gave me chills. I'm like, that's amazing. That's an amazing moment. And that's all I'm saying about that. A couple of negatives. A couple of negatives. Oh, and I love the great friendship with the bodyguard. I thought that was a nice
Listen,
friendship.
Ving Rhames is so good in this. He doesn't do much. He is completely believable.
100% believable. Yeah. And even just like when he's showing him all the pictures, he has like the photo album and he's like, the scrapbook or whatever. He's like, oh, look, there's your arm. And there's, and there you are over here. I can see, like, he's so cute that way. Yeah. Just pointing out. And then he's like, we should wear more vests. Yeah. More sweaters. Yeah. And he's like, sweaters make my neck look big. And he's like, well, what about a sweater vest? Like, that little conversation was so good.
One of my favorite moments is the very, very, very end, where Ving Rhames pops up.
And he pops up
in front of the office door.
Oh my god. I mean, talk about leaving on a high note, right?
I was like, I'm going to miss him. And I'm like, no.
And then he shows up and you're like, oh, I love you. Like, it really is such a good final moment. One of the best final moments, I think. So I just want to say a couple of different negatives. So one is when they're pulled over in the car. Like, all right, so they escape the White House, right? He and Sigourney Weaver, the president's wife. Yeah. They take a drive because they just wanted to go out, and of course it's like a project or whatever. But they do it. They end up getting pulled over. Yeah. And they have to get out of the car. I just felt like, I don't know that scene was necessary.
Completely agree.
I feel like it was too long, and I really just don't think it was a necessary scene.
Why did they both have to get out of the car? I have never seen that.
They both did not need to get out of the car.
What was the problem in the first place?
I think, I don't know, maybe a light out or something. I don't know what it was. But it was something stupid. And then she comes out and they start, like, performing Annie. Yeah. Like, it was just kind of a dumb scene. And I really feel like the whole scene was set up for that last line where he said, you're really good, but the First Lady could use some more.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Like, I feel like the whole scene was set up for just that. There was no other purpose for it.
They were bonding. And in fact, I don't think that police scene bonded them more.
Not at all.
Because it was like, it was actually the dumbest, probably the dumbest part of the movie. Like,
I wish they didn't even have that scene.
I agree. I think, because, they, going forward into the movie, there is a scene where Sigourney Weaver is singing Tomorrow in her bed, remember? She has the pillow, and we get it. She's actually falling in love with this guy who is just a much nicer version of her husband.
Yes.
And that's a tough thing. I think we had to spend some time with her character to be like, okay, she's not, she understands the ridiculousness of having feelings for this person, but we had to spend some time with her to understand that she's a smart, well-balanced woman who's aware of the absurdity of this. So fine. But I don't think, to your point, that police officer scene is just not the way to get that done, because they were having a great conversation already. They could have been eating sandwiches, and he could have started singing. He's like, well, you know what they say, sun will come out tomorrow, and they could have just started singing badly together. It didn't need a police. Like, it was so weird.
Well, she could have just been looking at her phone of like pictures of him at the shelter.
You wouldn't look at your phone for pictures at that point.
Well, whatever. Like a scrapbook or a newspaper. Something.
Christina, I'm being very nice to you, but...
Are you?
Well, yeah, because I don't think someone's going to have a scrapbook in their car.
All right. Pipe down a little bit, mister.
God.
I'm saying
it was going so well. It was going so well.
In her bed when she was singing Tomorrow, right?
Okay, yeah.
They didn't need her to be singing Tomorrow either. She could have just been looking through like a newspaper and seeing pictures of him, the new him.
Okay, you switch scenes.
Rolling around on, the ground or whatever with the dogs or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, fine.
Anyway, it could have been done better.
Sure.
The other negative I have is, unfortunately, at the end, when the First Lady comes to see him.
Okay.
So I understand. We all want them to get together and everything is great, right? And I wanted them together and everything too. Okay? But, so think about this in reality. Okay? It's the First Lady. Mm-hmm. So imagine, I don't know, Laura Bush or somebody, right?
Okay.
And George Bush dies, and then a few months later she starts dating someone who looks exactly like him. Like, the press is always going to be following her around.
For a bit, yeah.
Forever. You always know what the First Ladies have been up to.
Just stop it. You're scaring me.
They always have Secret Service. They always, any kind of newsworthy thing. The press would have a field day with that.
Christina, listen, she was wearing a baseball cap.
So nobody recognized her. I get it. Those baseball caps are really something.
I have that note, by the way. I have that note. I wrote, I love the ending with Sigourney Weaver showing up in disguise with a baseball cap.
It's like a Stefano de Mera disguise, right?
Master of disguise.
So, yeah.
But I hear you. I think, again, we talked about it's a feel-good movie.
It's a feel-good movie. There's no other way they would have been able to do it.
I do think you said 6 months. Did you say 6 months?
It's about 6 months because some time goes by and the president dies.
Right.
And the swearing in, like all that sort of happens.
Right.
It was like 5 months, I think, or 6 months. And then she shows up, which is still not a lot of time. I mean, according to the American people, right? Imagine, we don't know the behind-the-scenes stuff. The president dies and 5 months later or 6 months later, she's dating someone who looks just like him. Like, it just doesn't it doesn't really ring true. And I feel like the rest of the movie is pretty realistic in a way.
Yeah.
Right? It just seems and I don't know how else they would have done it.
Yeah.
Because you do want them together.
Yeah.
But anyway, it would have been better, maybe even if it wasn't such a romantic ending. Like, maybe it was more like she was going to help him with his campaign, because now he's running for office, right? He's running for some sort of office. Maybe she came to him as an advisor or something like that, just to make it more realistic. I don't know. It just seemed like a little bit off. But anyway, because I said to him, I wrote down, how can they date now?
Well, it would have been cute. What they probably could have done. I hear what you're saying, and yet I didn't care.
He could have put a baseball cap on, too, I suppose.
But Matt, it would have been funny if they did that, right? And the final scene you see is actually Oliver Stone being like, now if you look at the woman,
my gosh, that would have been
the first
great.
lady is dating now, and you look at the old, and then it could have just ended there. Someone could have clicked the button off on the screen. Yeah. But I hear what you're saying, and at the same time, I didn't care at all.
Yeah. No, and you don't really care at that point. You just kind of go with it. You're like, okay, that's fine. They're dating now.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Can I sound conclusively now and say definitely see this movie? Did you like it more, about the same? Or?
I think I liked it more.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think I liked it more.
I appreciate it a lot more now.
Well, especially with the current,
it
climate.
Was so eerie. It was, you said eerie, completely eerie. Yeah.
It just reminded, it was sad in a way, because it reminded me of a better time when people weren't always so love him or hate him. Like, people actually changed their mind about him, which I thought was really enlightening.
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen anyone change their mind about anybody ever in the past, 5 years at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, or even 10 years probably. But it was sad in that way, but I really, really enjoyed it.
Well, I think it's movie. About the success of our country. It's like you want, I think there's ways of looking at this where it's like you want what's great for Americans, or you want what's great for you.
Right.
And I think that with Dave and the enthusiasm behind it is that people were excited because he was helping the homeless, even though they weren't homeless. People were excited that he was getting unemployed people jobs, even if you already had a job, and that wasn't going to benefit you. But you could support the love and caring of people that were out of work to help them get jobs. And even if you had one, you were still happy about that. That's what America is, and I think this feel-good idea behind Dave is just it was a great thing to watch.
It was a really great thing to watch. I absolutely 100% recommend this movie if you have not seen it. After you vote, or maybe before you vote, go rent it and watch it. It's so good. It's really, really a feel-good movie. 100%.
Yeah.
For sure.
So questions, and then we'll go in from that into a fuck, marry, kill.
Let's do it. Oh my gosh, old roommate.
So I have a question for you.
Okay,
this is super goofy, and I think I know the answer because it's a match. We're doing a match game, and it's not a real match game. It's a match. It's it's a newlywed game.
Yeah.
But I'm curious. Maybe you won't see what I think you're going to say. Okay, Christina, the country needs you.
Oh boy.
You need to impersonate a past first lady or a past, what would you call the vice president's wife? What is that called? Second lady?
Second lady?
Is it true? I don't know. Oh my god. So you have to impersonate a former, current or former first lady or current or former vice president's wife.
Okay.
Okay. I want you to think about it, because this might be a two-parter, but I think I know what you're going to say, but who do you think...
I have to think about the first ladies.
Really?
But go ahead. No, it's okay.
Okay. But who do you think you could pull off...
I think, all right.
Bump, bump.
I don't think it would be Betty Ford. Who would I want?
I'm really shocked. Like, if you're like, you have to... There's a situation...
And I have to impersonate
them? You will have a makeup team. You will have an arsenal.
So I don't necessarily have to look.
Not necessarily, but who do you think you could sort of... I mean, I think I had a very...
All right. I guess I would have to go with Michelle Obama. Because you know why?
Oh my god, you're serious?
Yes, I really am.
Right.
Well, because of the makeup, obviously.
Okay,
I look a lot like her to begin with, but... No, you know why? Because I feel like I'm pretty much down to earth, and I'm not one that's going to want to wear, like, the fancy dress. Because I was thinking Jackie O first, but I'm like...
I thought Hillary, instantly, because the blonde hair, I feel like you could... Like, I feel like you could do something to your voice, to...
But you said there was going to be a makeup
No, absolutely, yeah. I added that later. But only because you're struggling so much.
All right, that's enough out of you. That's enough out of you. I wanted to give it a thoughtful answer.
Okay, Christina.
No, because I was thinking about, like, the different... And I wasn't really thinking about second ladies, to be honest. But, I mean, actually, no, she was a first lady. Oh, my God.
My God!
Oh, my God. I don't know what I'm thinking right now. I forgot Bill Clinton was our president. Isn't that funny?
I know. I know.
I completely forgot about that. So, anyways... no, she would be okay. I think I would choose...
I understand your Michelle choice. I do.
Yeah, because I feel like she's a little bit less stiff.
Yeah, she seems super accessible. She's cool. She's got good nature. She's down to earth.
Yeah, I feel like her personality is a little bit more, relatable, I guess. Everybody else is kind of like political.
Stiff. You're absolutely right. Very starchy. She's like...
Or old-fashioned.
She's one of the... I don't know. And I love... Well, I love the Obamas. But, like, I love Michelle. And, I can see that.
Yeah, I'm actually not a huge fan of Michelle's, to be honest. I mean, I like her. Yeah. I'm not, like, a huge fan of hers, but I think I could pull it off.
Yeah, I think so, too.
Thank you.
And that was my question for you.
All right, very nice.
I put Hillary. I really did. It was like, Hillary, because it's like you already have the blonde hair. You do a little bit something different with your voice, and you'd have makeup. And...
Well, Emily would be very upset that I didn't choose Hillary because she loves Amy Poehler so much, and she was a great impersonator of Hillary on Saturday Night Live. So anyway, we just won't tell her that. All right, FMK.
Okay.
Are you ready? Not terribly difficult, I don't think. All right, so Dave.
Yeah.
President Mitchell.
Yeah.
And Bob Alexander. And, alright, so... Alright, I already know what you're going to do.
It might be controversial.
Okay.
I think I would... Oh my god, I would say Kill Bill.
Whoa.
You know, so... I didn't like him at all. I don't think... I wouldn't
He's not a nice person.
No. Bob... I actually laughed a lot at Bob. I liked his seriousness. He was ultimately he was the villain. But I think I could get through an experience with him. So I would F Bob and marry Dave.
Isn't that nice?
Oh. That's not
what I said.
No.
Obviously, we married Dave.
Right.
Who's not going to want to marry Dave?
Right.
But I thought you would F Bill because he obviously has a lot of experience in the bad room.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of like what I was thinking. And Bob is just a jerk.
I know, but I didn't like... But Bill's like a philanderer. He's
right, so
he's a bit dirty.
He's kind of like a Bill Clinton.
I see what you're saying.
He's kind of like... He's probably good at... Maybe he's not. That's a big assumption. But anyway, that's all right. So I guess that's it for this episode. So
Happy Election Day!
Happy Election Day! Go out and vote. Be heard. Use your American right. Do this. Let's do this! All right.
And that is it for us and for this episode of Old Roommates. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to Old Roommates on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever you listen to podcasts. And give us a rating or review while you're there, please.
If you have an idea for the show or a suggestion or comment, you can email us at oldroommatespod@gmail.com. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Old Roommates. This is Christina.
And this is Brian.
Thanks again for listening. Until next time.